The American president is saying that the land operations in Venezuela are going to begin soon in what he describes as a war against drug trafficking. Donald Trump also is imposing an air blockade on Venezuela, and he's looking to, that's it now, start a war with Venezuela. Why is he doing that? Well, the American forces army attacked a ship going from Venezuela in what they described as a drug smuggling operation. And they killed everyone who was on that small boat without verification, without proving that they had anything, without identification. No, nothing whatsoever. They said anyone who had traffics drugs were going to kill them. And now he is talking about Venezuela, an actual war. We're talking about war, ladies and gentlemen. This is something very big. But in this video, I'm going to have two parts. The first one is to bring a little bit of a background about the reality of drugs and the United States administration and the intelligence agencies and very powerful bodies within the government, the federal government, and how they don't go to wars against drugs, but they do go to wars for drugs. I'm going to give you several examples. The second part is going to be about potentially the real motives behind Trump going to Venezuela. But let me give you a bit of a background. The United States several times warned the leaders of Venezuela, whether it was previously Chavez and then Maduro, because Venezuela is, of course, the country with the highest reserves of oil in the whole world. And of course, the United States imposed embargo, sanctions, several coup attempts that failed previously. They recognize these puppets all of a sudden as presidents. They give Nobel Peace Prizes to these random people who pledge allegiance to Israel. Hello, coincidence. And they've had problems with Venezuela for a very long time. Typical American arrogance and greed from the authorities, because they want to subjugate other countries and steal their wealth and force them into this system that the United States has. But now Donald Trump is escalating with them, and it's all about drugs. And what I'm going to do today is give you 10 examples, maybe a little bit more, about the exact opposite, about how the United States went to wars for drugs and went to wars to bring drug cartels and drug lords into power. Let's begin with this one over here. In this case, we're talking about the Laos case. The United States and the Air America and the Laos opium pipeline in the 60s, in the 70s. Now, in the Vietnam War, the CIA ran a covert airline called Air America. Officially, it transported supplies for the fight against communism, as the United States described, but historians like Alfred McCoy documented that Air America flew in and out of regions controlled by opium-producing Hmong allies, knowingly enabling the trade. The CIA denies it trafficked drugs, but mountains of evidence shows its allies absolutely did, and the agency looked the other way. That's just the first example for you. The second example, we will go this time to opium and the post-colonial rule in Vietnam, and how the United States participated with that too. The United States, with certain French connection, had allies in Indochina. And one of those, of course, the main bodies was the CIA. We're talking about the 50s and the 60s, before Air America. French intelligence and Corsican mafia groups controlled the heroin trade out of Vietnam. The CIA's anti-communist strategy helped these same networks maintain power. And we're talking about direct participation here. They try and cover things up to show that they're not running it, but in effect protecting the drug runners, protecting the people who participate in this campaign, give them money, fund them, and their leaders operate for them in many cases. Of course, they try and cover their backs as much as possible, but several investigations and people and everything to do with evidence came up, including inquiries from the American government itself, proved the exact opposite. The next one is none other than Nicaragua and Central America, excuse me. One of these examples here is the Contras, the Nicaragua Contras, and several books were published and studies about it. One of them was from Peter Dale Scott. The Contras fighting the Sandinistas had multiple commanders involved in cocaine trafficking. A 1989 US Senate investigation, which was called the Kerry Committee Report, confirmed this and confirmed that US agencies were aware. Again, the CIA did not directly run the operation, but invisibly controlling and partnering with the people who did, knowingly. That's the third example for you. Now let's go to the fourth example. The fourth example is, again, we're talking about Central America and Latin America, Nicaragua, with the LA crack cocaine allegations. Gary Webb, this time, revealed that Contra-connected drug traffickers played a key role in bringing cocaine into American cities in the 1980s. Official investigations didn't blame the CIA directly for the crack epidemic, but they did confirm that CIA-linked Contras were trafficking, CIA failed to act, and CIA protected sources despite DEA warnings. This was a massive case at the time, undeniably one of the biggest cases, when the United States was pretending, and we're going to get to that era, that it was having a war on drugs. Then you know someone named Manuel Noriega. I'm sure you've heard about Manuel Noriega, a dictator. Did you know that he was a very good friend of the CIA? Did you know that he was a CIA asset? Manuel Noriega, a long-time CIA asset, was simultaneously collaborating with the Medellin cartel. Escobar, ladies and gentlemen. The CIA funded him, trained him, used him, even while he facilitated millions of dollars of cocaine trafficking. Only when he stopped serving the US interests, he became the bad guy. The United States started saying, oh, Manuel Noriega is bad, he's no good, and you know, the typical games that the United States plays. Then we have a very interesting case about the Mena airport. The Mena airport was a case that was very famous in the 1980s with a man named Barry Seal, who was a pilot tied to both the DEA and the CIA, and, helped run cocaine shipments connected to Contra resupply operations. Investigations at the time confirmed that the SEAL used the Mena airport. CIA-linked operatives were active there. Oversight was almost non-existent. But again, you know, here with this situation, the full CIA involvement was never proven, but there were too many signs. The smoke was thick enough to suffocate the entire state. Okay? That's with the Mena Airport, Arkansas. Which leads us to, and by the way, at the time, we were talking about the war on drugs. Do you remember the war on drugs? Led by Ronald Reagan. He was talking about the war on drugs when the CIA was running all of these operations in Latin America, Central America, all across the world. Cocaine, heroin, all of that. The United States. And the president was saying war on drugs, war on drugs, war on drugs. Now, the next example that I wanted to bring you this time is the death squad. Have you heard of the death squad, ladies and gentlemen? I'll share one of their Wikipedia pages. Yeah, I know it's not always like a reliable source, but there's information that I'm going to share with you from other sources on this one here. The Battalion 316, in particular, in the death squad, worked closely with the CIA. There was a counterinsurgency unit later exposed for torture, assassinations, and drug trafficking. Declassified documents proved U.S. officials were aware of trafficking allegations and continued cooperation anyway. Again, they pretend that they don't know, but then when some declassified information gets published, they start changing and, pretending like we didn't know, and it didn't happen. The following example that I wanted to talk to you about is Haiti. Let's look at this here. This was a very old article. After the 1991 coup, the CIA funded Haitian paramilitary group FRAPH, and it was linked to cocaine trafficking networks. A 1997 congressional investigation revealed the U.S. had been working with individuals deeply tied to drug shipments heading to Miami. Miami, ladies and gentlemen. That's the United States. The final and one of the most recent examples, a very interesting example that is, because we're talking about then allies that turned into foes and none other than, of course, Afghanistan. And we had two bouts here. Firstly, when the United States was calling the Mujahideen of Afghanistan resistance at the time and meeting them and telling them, you are the soldiers of God and we're going to help you, because they were fighting the Soviets at the time. And the next example was when the United States invaded Afghanistan in 2001. So what exactly happened in these two instances with Afghanistan? Well, interestingly, the production of heroin from opium increased by 90% after the United States participation. 90%. They were supporting the people fighting the Soviets at the time, and the United States funneled money through Pakistan's ISI. That's very well known. Many of the fighters financed themselves through drugs. Heroin labs exploded along the Afghan-Pakistan border. The CIA, according to a stack of UN investigative reports, adopted a don't ask, don't interfere policy. Heroin production soared and followed the fighters wherever they went. Then, when the United States invaded Afghanistan, that became very interesting, because at the time, there were many reports that the United States CIA shipped tons and tons of heroin and opium from Afghanistan in CIA planes directly to the United States and other parts of the world, according to several intelligence agencies at the time, including the Russian one. Now, you may say, well, that's they didn't provide evidence, they didn't provide this and that. Okay, fair enough, but let me give you some of the examples here. Opium production at the time, when the United States went to Afghanistan in 2001, after the false flag of 9/11, was 180 tons, 185 tons. After the United States invaded, particularly in 2007, it soared to 8,000. That was the biggest increase in Afghanistan's history. What happened? Well, the United States came. The United States came to occupy Afghanistan. All of a sudden, one of the biggest producers, not the biggest producer of, one of the biggest producers of opium at the time. The United States partnered with warlords who were governors, police chiefs, intelligence partners, informants, operatives, and major opium traffickers. Many of the figures that they dealt with, including people like Muhammad Fahim Dostum, Ahmad Wali Karzai, Gul Agha Sherzai, controlled heroin labs, poppy growing regions, and smuggling routes. The US military, including soldiers interviewed for the Afghani papers, admitted they were ordered, don't fight the drug trade, it will destabilize the mission. Heroin labs knowingly allowed to run. Were knowingly allowed to run when the United States was there. The United States backed traffickers, it protected them, and it stopped the DEA from targeting some of them. The production skyrocketed under US watch. What do we conclude from all of this evidence? And of course, this is not conclusive. I'm just giving you a hint, because the American president is declaring war against Venezuela under the excuse that he wants to target drug trafficking, and he might send Americans perhaps to die. What do we conclude? That the United States goes to wars to obtain and protect and nurture and produce drugs and create epidemics of drugs and kill tens and hundreds of thousands and millions of people, and they hook them and addict them to drugs, including American people. Now, here's my take on why the United States is doing that. Apart from all of these reasons that, of course, contradict the main notion coming from the United States president and the desire of the United States to control all of the oil reserves of Venezuela. You see, we're now in a situation where the genocide state of Israel is looking to expand its genocide, and they are eyeing up a big war against Iran again, and they want to drag the United States military. However, if the United States military is engaged in an operation to fight drugs in Latin America, they can't come and help Israel. Even if Benjamin Netanyahu applies more pressure, even if another Epstein file pops out of nowhere, and even if it's going to be very difficult. Trump will tell them, I'm busy with Venezuela. I can't come, I'm sorry. I mean, we all know they haven't been effective with a group, a small group like Ansarullah in Yemen, who targeted 4 aircraft carriers, let alone Iran. Iran can sink aircraft carriers. Ansarullah, Yemen, poverty-stricken, small country. Well, not very small, but you know what I mean. War-torn, targeting US aircraft carriers. What are they going to do with Iran? And Donald Trump wants to avoid this as much as possible. But the Israeli prime minister is pushing for a war against Iran. And if Donald Trump has the excuse of a war against Venezuela, regardless of how baseless, absolutely baseless, shameful, and hilarious the claim is about him going there to combat drug trafficking, he would still at least tell Israel, I can't come and rescue you. I'm busy dealing with drug trafficking in Venezuela.